Very important. Happy Groundhog's Day. Punxsutawney Phil, the most famous groundhog. He's a little cutie patootie right there. He saw his shadow this morning, so 6 more weeks of winter, and I am totally fine with that as long as it comes with snow days. So, also, before we get started, we are going to finish Hatchet this week. There are 19 chapters and an epilogue, which is like a what happens afterwards kind of a thing. Jason, put it away. And then, so at the end of this week, we will take the AR test. There will be a big final paper test that we take. And then next week, we will have a Hatchet project. I sent a message on Seesaw to you guys and your families yesterday, but I wanted to kind of go over that. You are going to be creating a diorama. Have you guys made a diorama before? I feel like you have.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you a picture, I think. All right. Calm down. So it's this kind of thing where you build a little, let me see if I can, oh, there we go, get it bigger. All right. So we're going to take a shoebox or some other kind of box that you guys have. Jason, I said put it away. I'm not going to tell you more than once. You can spend your day in the office again if you need to. Okay. All right. So this is Hatchet. He's out in nature, right? So it should be pretty easy for you to find things to put in your diorama. You can create whatever scene from Hatchet that you want to. Okay. This one looks like his shelter that he built. There's the log wall and the cliff. Here's some trees, rocks, grass. Here's one where he looks like he used some Play-Doh or something. Made the pond. That looks like maybe that's the crashed plane in the lake. Here, this guy used some action figure type things. He's got a toy bear in there, and I guess that's supposed to be Brian. I think that foil is supposed to be the lake. Okay, he put some sand or dirt or something in there. I think, is that the smoke from the plane crashing?
Signal fire, maybe.
It looks like the tornado.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the tornado. Okay, there's the plane sticking out of the water. Interesting. Okay.
Did they not know that the lake's supposed to be in an L shape?
Calm down. Lake's supposed to be in an L shape. Good point. All right, so this is this was fun. It looks like an underwater part. So there's the plane crash, and there's a raft. And here's the plane underneath the water, and there's some plants underneath the water. The trees.
The man's dead body has a Lego.
Oh yeah, look, this must be the dead pilot down there, or maybe it's Brian swimming. Not really sure. Okay. Now, so you are going to be building your own diorama. No, next week. I said that already. Next week. Do not work on it at home. If you if you're face-to-face kid or virtual kids, you're going to obviously be working on it at home, but don't start it yet because we're going to have 2 whole class periods that's specifically for working on that. So if you work on it right now, you guys aren't going to have anything to work on next week when the rest of us are working on it because they have to do theirs in class. So that being said, face-to-face friends, you need to start gathering some supplies. Look around your house, look around your yard, bring in some stuff that you can turn into a scene from Hatchet, okay? And then next week we will build it. If you need a shoebox or something like that, I think I have extra shoe boxes. Okay. Then, so that's that. That's next week that we're going to be working on that. Next week is only a 3-day week because we have our virtual day on Monday like normal, but then there's no school on Friday. It's a teacher meeting day. So we only have school Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, well, you have your packet to do, and you guys will have specials to do on Monday. But you're not here. You're only here in person for 3 days next week. Okay, so that's what's going on with Hatchet. Now, I wasn't here. I didn't have my book with me because this is my personal copy here that I keep here. So I have no idea. Remind me what happened in chapter 16. Raise your hand. Josie, you've had your hand raised for a while, actually, so go for it.
Well, first he got like attacked by a moose, and then a tornado came and knocked everything down. And then he saw the tail of the plane from out come out of the lake.
All right, so chapter 16, there was a lot going on. I'm really sad I missed that chapter. That's a fun chapter.
Read it.
I don't know, we're not going to repeat a chapter. We're going to keep moving. Okay, so
No, I mean like when you like.
I mean, I could go back and read it. I've read this book several times. You guys just reminding me. Let's see here.
What happened?
Yeah, then I kind of know. I'm just trying to remember.
What happened in that chapter, Wes?
He sees the plane. The tornado must have changed the position of the plane in the water, right? That's what he thought. And that's where the chapter kind of ended, right? Him thinking about, there's the plane. Josie, go ahead.
So, can we start, like, gathering our supplies and planning out what it's going to look like at home? Like,
You can kind of like in your head start planning out what you want it to look like, because that way you'll be able to gather supplies. But don't actually start putting it together yet.
okay, but
yes.
I don't think I have any figurines, but Harry Potter figurines. So,
You're a wizard, Brian.
yeah,
I don't.
Legos.
Brian can be a wizard now. It's okay.
Who knows how?
Use your imagination.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I like Harry Potter also. Two totally separate boys, but yeah, you can go for it, Jose. Okay. So chapter. Oh, Maggie, yes.
So, can I tell you what I'm doing for my diagram? I'm going to do Brian getting attacked by the moose.
That's what I was thinking.
All right, Maggie's already wheels spinning about Brian getting attacked by the moose.
That's what I was
told my
thinking.
mom
Okay.
about it.
Hang on.
That's what
Let
I
me
was
double
thinking
check
about.
that it can be anything. Let me double check. Hang on.
That's what I'm doing, Maggie. That's what I was
We have been
thinking.
reading Hatchet in class the past 3 weeks. We've enjoyed the story so much. Make a presentation. Create a diorama. Make a model of Brian's camp and environment using toys, clay, Legos, any craft supply you can think of. Okay, so it needs to be his camp and the area around.
Okay.
If you want to put the moose in his camp, you can. It says include everything he sees and uses to help him survive. And then you have to write a paragraph describing your scene that you created. So if you are recreating the moose attack, just make sure you're recreating like his shelter around the lake, and then put him and the moose like at the edge of the lake or
Miss
whatever. Okay.
Miss Bab,
Um,
I had two things. Either
'kay.
the part where he gets attacked by the moose, like what Maggie said, or the part where he sees the wolf and the bear.
where he sees the wolf and the bears up on the ledge.
No, the bear and the bear cubs were in his shelter, and the wolf was up on the
Yeah.
top.
All right. Gray.
Will this be partner project? Or?
No, this is you. Each one of you is building your own. This is not a partner project, and it is for a grade. So you are doing this, and I want you to take it seriously because it is for a grade, and the more detail you put into it, the better your grade will be. Okay, we will talk more specifically about the project at the end of this week when we're done with the book. Right now, we need to read the book. Okay. Yeah, they were sitting in the hallway last year, some of them. Yeah. So yeah, like I implore you, I beg you, take it seriously. Do your best on this. Be kind of thinking in your head. Okay.
I did one of them last year for that.
All right, here we go. Chapter 17. Oh, when I say the word suspense, what does that mean? Have you heard the word suspense before? What does suspense mean? Sam says things are getting more intense. Josie, what do you think? I agree, Sam.
I think of suspense as like it's building up to something.
It's a climax.
Okay, it's building up to maybe like a climax moment. Things are getting more intense. Kind of like if I was like watching a movie, I would be like on the edge of my seat kind of a thing. Like maybe
Wanting to know what happened.
wanting to know what happens next. Like you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? So like, I feel like chapter 16 was full of several moments that were suspenseful that had you on the edge of your seat. Like, oh my gosh, I can't read fast enough. Like Josie and Zeke, I think, have talked about like, you can't read, like you're so excited about what's happening. You want to know what's happening. You can't read fast enough to figure it out. So like the tornado scene and the moose, like those both, I feel like were like, oh my gosh, what's happening? What's happening? Like very suspenseful, very on the edge of your seat. And now we're left like, wait, the plane's sticking out of the water. Now what? What's that mean? What does that change anything for Brian that the plane's sticking out of the lake? He'll rebuild it?
Maybe he'll actually try and buy something to it, try and get it out.
Get the radio thing out.
Jason says get the radio thing out.
Or the survival kit. The survival kit.
Or the survival kit.
Hey, that came in handy. But wait. Whoa, maybe. Yeah, trying to get the plane out far enough. Yeah.
Josie, what are your thoughts?
It's really just a question, but I wanted to know about the paragraph that we're supposed to make. Is it going to be like describing what happened and like
In the scene?
Yeah, or is it going to be like I put his shelter, I put the moose that attacked him.
I just write it like a story. Hang on. Hello. Okay, thanks. Okay, Kendall, when we're done reading, there's a water bottle for you in the office. But I don't want you to miss us reading. So, okay. Yeah, it's going to be, I don't want you to just write, this is his shelter. This is the lake. This is the, no. You know, I don't want you to write that. That's boring.
Write the scene from the
but do I want you to just copy a paragraph from the book? No.
That would be.
That's plagiarizing, and also, like I want you, because it took lots of different paragraphs for us to get the image in our head of what everything looked like.
Yeah,
So you're just going to kind of summarize the scene that I'm looking at.
Write sentence.
So you might say, Brian was brutally attacked by a moose one morning while walking to the lake.
To get,
blah, blah, blah.
He was trying to get a bird. I'm pretty sure it was.
So to clean the bird, yeah. Okay. Chapter 17. Here we go. He turned. Oh, Kane. Yeah, I see it. The survival pack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kane. I hear you. Wink, wink. Jason was onto something there, I'm just going to say. All right, here we go. He turned back to his campsite and looked to the wreckage. He had a lot to do. Rebuild his shelter, get a new fire going, find some food or get ready to find some food, make weapons, and he had to work slowly because his ribs hurt. First things first, he tried to find some dry grass and twigs, then peeled bark from a nearby birch to shred into a fire nest. He worked slowly, but even so, with his new skill, he had a fire going in less than an hour. The flames cut the cool, damp morning, crackled, and did much to bring his spirits up, not to mention chasing away those incessant and mosquitoes. Incessant means like they are like, they're like annoying and they never stop. Like they just keep on just constantly bugging him. Incessant mosquitoes. With the fire going, he searched for dry wood. The rain had driven water into virtually all the wood he could find, and at last located some in a thick evergreen where the top branches had covered the lower dead ones, keeping them dry. He had great difficulty breaking them, not being able to pull much with his arm or chest muscles, but finally got enough to keep the fire going all day and into the night. With that, he rested a bit, eased his chest, and then set about getting a shelter squared away. Much of the wood from his original wall was still nearby, and up in back of the ridge, he actually found a major section of the weave still intact. The wind had torn it out, lifted it, and thrown it to the top of the ridge, and Brian felt lucky once more that he had not been killed or more seriously injured, which would have been the same, he thought. If he couldn't hunt, he would die, and if he were injured badly, he would not be able to hunt. He jerked and dragged wood around until the wall was once more in place, crudely, but he could improve it later. What does crudely mean? He put the wall once more in place, but it crudely. Fiona, thanks for raising your hand.
I think he put it not quite like the bed,
Okay, it wasn't his best effort, but he got it up. Crudely means kind of like rough. Like it wasn't the best that he's done, but it was up. At least it was there and it was something. He could fix it better later, right? Okay.
After he gets all the other stuff.
Right. He had no trouble finding enough pine boughs to make a new bed. The storm had torn the forest to pieces. Up in back of the ridge, it looked like a giant had become angry and used some kind of massive meat grinder on the trees. Huge pines were twisted and snapped off, blown sideways. The ground was so littered with limbs and treetops sticking every which way that it was hard to get through. He pulled enough thick limbs in for a bed, green and spicy with the new broken sap smell. And by evening, he was exhausted, hungry, and hurting. But he had something close to a place to live again, a place to be. Tomorrow, he thought as he lay back in the darkness, tomorrow maybe the fish would be back and he would make a spear and new bow and get some food. Tomorrow he would find food and refine the camp and bring things back to sanity from the one completely insane day. He faced the fire, curving his body. He rested his head on his arm and began to sleep when a picture came into his head. The tail of the plane sticking out of the water. There it was, the tail sticking up. And inside the plane, near the tail somewhere, was the survival pack. It must have survived the crash because the plane's main body was still intact. That was the picture, the tail sticking up and the survival pack inside. Right there in his mind as he dozed. His eyes snapped open. If I could get at the pack, he thought. Oh, if I could get at the pack, it probably had food and knives and matches. It might have a sleeping bag. It might have fishing gear. Oh, it must have so many wonderful things. If I could get at the pack and just get some of those things, I'd be rich. So rich if I could get at the pack. Tomorrow. He watched the flames and smiled. Tomorrow I'll see. All things come tomorrow.
A med kit.
He slept deep and down with only the picture of the plane tail sticking up in his mind. A healing sleep. I got to rewind though. This survival pack has been underwater for a long time. How long's he been there? 40, 50 days?
Like a month or two.
If there were food and matches in that bag, would they be any good?
Well,
Do
depends.
you want to eat food that's been under dirty water for 40 something days?
Miss that.
What if water cannot get inside of it?
Okay, so maybe it was sealed up so the water couldn't get inside. Okay, I hope so. Fiona.
Wait, like, what if there's like some kind of code that he has to figure out before he can actually like get into it to get the?
Okay, Fiona says maybe there's some sort of code he has to type in to get into the plane or whatever. Okay.
Probably
We'll
certain
see.
date. Probably certain date.
Okay, and matches are made of wood, and if you leave wood sitting in water,
They'll get waterlogged.
it'll get waterlogged and it kind of swells up. So are those, even if he dries the matches out, are they going to work anymore?
Well, the wood part ain't what matters. It's the one red part.
Jason says it's the red part at the tip is what matters, but I don't know what happens to that if it gets wet either.
It burns the stick.
But yeah, it has to have something to light onto after that red part ignites. And if that,
Bird feathers.
okay, well, we'll see.
Because he never got to clean that
We'll
bird.
see. All right. In the morning, he rolled out before true light. In the gray dawn, he built up the fire and found more wood for the day, feeling almost chipper because his ribs were much better now. With camp ready for the day, he looked to the lake. Part of him half expected the plane tail to be gone, sunk back into the depths, but he saw that it was still there, didn't seem to have moved at all. He looked down at his feet and saw that there were some fish in his fish pen looking for the tiny bits of bait still left from before the wind came. He fought impatience to get on the plane project and remembered sense. Remembered that what he had first learned. First food, because food made strength. First food, then thought, then action. There were fish at hand here, and he might not be able to get anything from the plane. That was all a dream. The fish were real, and his stomach, even his new shrunken stomach, was sending signals that it was savagely empty. He made a fish spear with 2 points, not peeling the bark all the way back, but just working on the pointed end. It took him an hour or so, and all the time he worked, he sat looking at the tail of the plane sticking up in the air, his hands working on the spear, his mind working on the problem of the plane. When the spear was done, although still crude, he jammed a wedge between the points to spread them apart and went to the fish pond. There were not clouds of fish, but at least 10, and he picked one of the larger ones, a round fish almost 6 inches long, and put the spear point in the water, held it, then thrust with a flicking motion of his wrist when the fish was just above the point. The fish was pinned neatly, and he took 2 more with the same ease, then carried all 3 back up to the fire. He had a fish board now, a piece of wood he had flattened with the hatchet that leaned up by the fire for cooking fish, so he didn't have to hold a stick all the time. He put the 3 fish on the board, pushed sharpened pegs through their tails into cracks on the cooking board, and propped it next to the reddest part of the coals. In moments, the fish were hissing and cooking with the heat, and as soon as they were done, or when he could stand the smell no longer, he picked the steaming meat from under the loosened skin and ate it. The fish did not fill him, did not even come close. Fish meat was too light for that, but they gave him strength. He could feel it moving into his arms and legs, and he began to work on the plane project. While making the spear, he had decided that what he would have to do is make a raft and paddle the raft to the plane and tie it there for a working base. Somehow he would have to get into the tail, inside the plane, rip or cut his way in, and however he did it, he would need an operating base of some kind, a raft, which he found ruefully was much easier said than done. There were plenty of logs around. The shore was littered with driftwood, new and old, tossed up and scattered by the tornado, and it was a simple matter to find 4 of them about the same length and pull them together. I'm going to pause. Grayson.
Now I know what that one thing is where we thought it was him swimming up out of the water from the crash. That could be him with his raft getting down in the plane.
Grayson said that made him just think of, this is making him think of that one diorama, this one, because there's raft, and he says that's not Brian swimming away from the plane, that's Brian swimming down to the plane. Possibly.
That kid was a smart kid.
All right. Okay, he had 4 logs, and he pulled them together. Keeping them together was the problem. Without rope or cross pieces and nails, the logs just rolled and separated. He tried wedging them together, crossing them over each other. Nothing seemed to work. What?
If it's before, I think he just use vines.
Okay, Sean said he needs to go find some vines. So far, he hasn't mentioned any vines. I don't know that they have those kind of trees in Canada that have vines, because most of the trees around there are like evergreen trees, like Christmas type trees. And so they have those little like bristly things. They don't have like vines and leaves.
Miss Bab, you know those like trees that have those like vines that have like roots inside of the bark that go like touch the bark?
So like vines that go around the outside of a tree?
Yeah, like those.
So those are more like an actual like plant or a bush?
But they're like stuck to the tree. Like
they grow, yeah, they grow onto the tree.
They're like tannish with these brownish, blackish things that go into the bark.
I mean, that would be a good idea if he could find some vines. That would work to tie the logs together. So let's see what he's going to figure out. And okay, nothing seemed to work. And he needed a stable platform to get the job done. It was becoming frustrating, and he had a momentary loss of temper, as he would have done in the past when he was the other person. At that point, he sat back on the beach and studied the problem again. Sense. He had to use a sense. That's all it took to solve problems, just sense. It came then. The logs he had selected were smooth and round and had no limbs. What he needed were logs with limbs sticking out. Then he could cross the limbs over one log over the limbs of another and weave them together as he had done his wall, the food shelf cover, and the fish gate. He scanned the area above the beach and found 4 dry treetops that had broken off by the storm. These had limbs, and he dragged them down to his work area at the water's edge and fitted them together. It took most of the day. The limbs were cluttered and stuck any which way, and he would have to cut one to make another fit, then cut one from another log to come back to the first one, then still another from a third log would have to be pulled in. But at last, in the late afternoon, he was done, and the raft, which he called Brush Pile 1 for its looks, hung together even as he pulled it into the water off the beach. It floated well, if low in the water, and in the excitement, he started for the plane. He could not stand on it, but would have to swim alongside. He was out to chest depth when he realized he had no way to keep the raft at the plane. He needed some way to tie it in place so he could work from it. And for a moment, he was stymied.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? He was stymied. He had no rope, only the bowstring and the other cut shoestring in his tennis shoes. For a moment, he was stymied Maggie, what do you think it might
Like-
mean?
Thinking or wondering something of what he can do.
Okay, thinking or wondering what he might be able to do. Sean, what do you think?
Well, actually, what Maggie said.
What Maggie said. Josie, what do you think?
Just my idea.
Maybe what Maggie said, but like also stalling and just like stopping to wonder, I guess.
Yeah, kind of like stalling, stopping to wonder. Jason.
So like he's like a little frustrated maybe because he did all that and then now he's out in the water. He's like, okay, now I have to get back over to find
Okay, so
something.
maybe even a little bit of frustrated, confused, like, okay, what am I going to do? I got all the way out here.
Now I have to go all the way back.
I got to go all the way back. I don't know what to do. Yeah, he doesn't know what to do. He's confused, frustrated, all of that. Okay.
Unless he just takes his shoestring off.
His shoestrings were now looking close to dead, his toes showing at the tops. Then he remembered his windbreaker, and he found the tattered part he'd used for an arrow pouch. He tore it into narrow strips and tied them together to make a rope or tie down about 4 feet long. It wasn't strong. He couldn't use it to pull a Tarzan and swing from tree to tree, but it should hold the raft to the plain. Once more, he slid the raft off the beach and out onto the water until he was chest deep. He had left his tennis shoes in the shelter, and when he felt the sand turn to mud between his toes, he kicked off the bottom and began to swim. Pushing the raft, he figured, was about like trying to push an aircraft carrier. All the branches that stuck down into the water dragged and pulled, and the logs themselves fought any forward motion. And he hadn't gone 20 feet when he realized that it was going to be much harder than he thought to get the raft to the plain. It barely moved, and if he kept going this way, he would just about reach the plain at dark. He decided to turn back again, spend the night, and start early in the morning. And he pulled the raft once more onto the sand and scraped it dry with his hand. Patience. He was better now, but impatience still ground at him a bit. So he sat at the edge of the fish pond with the new spear and took 3 more fish, cooked them up and ate them, which helped to pass the time until dark. He also dragged in more wood, endless wood, and then relaxed and watched the sun set over the trees and back of the ridge. West, he thought, I'm watching the sun set in the west, and that way was north where his father was, and that way east, and that way south, and somewhere to the south and east his mother would be. The news would be on television. He could visualize more easily his mother doing things than his father because he had never been to where his father lived now. He knew everything about how his mother lived. She would have the small television on, the kitchen counter on, and be watching the news and talking about how awful it was in South Africa or how cute the baby in the commercial looked, talking and making sounds, cooking sounds. He jerked his mind back to the lake. There was great beauty here, almost unbelievable beauty. The sun exploded the sky, just blew it up with the setting color, and that color came down into the water of the lake, lit the trees. Amazing beauty, and he wished he could share it with somebody and say, look there and over there, and see that? But even alone, it was beautiful, and he fed the fire to cut the night chill. There it is again, he thought, the late summer chill to the air, the smell of fall. He went to sleep thinking a kind of reverse question. He did not know if he would ever get out of this, could not see how it might be. But if he did somehow get home and go back to living the way he had lived, would it be just the opposite? Would he be sitting watching television and suddenly think about the sunset up in the back of the ridge and wonder how the color looked in the lake?
He missed the place.
So now he's wondering the reverse. When he gets home, if he gets home, if he ever gets home, would he miss being at the lake?
Probably. Yes. Not. Yes.
Sophie says yes.
He's dying out here, basically.
Jason says he's slowly dying. He wouldn't miss it. Josie, what do you think?
Maybe like a mixed emotion because he would not want to be there because he'd rather be with his family and have all the food that he needs and shelter, a proper shelter. But then again, like he might not want to because it's kind of helped him and he's a different person and maybe he wants to stay that way.
Okay, so maybe he likes this part of him that's changed. We know that he feels like a really big sense of pride and accomplishment for everything that he's been able to do
Accomplish.
while he's there. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what happens. In the morning, the chill was more pronounced, and he could see tiny wisps of vapor from his breath. He threw wood on the fire and blew until it flamed, then banked the flames to last and went down to the lake. Perhaps because the air was so cool, the water felt warm as he waded in. He made sure the hatchet was still at his belt and the raft still held together, then set out pushing the raft and kick swimming toward the tail of the plane. As before, it was very hard going. Once an eddy of a breeze came up against him and he seemed to be standing still. And by the time he was close enough to the tail to see the rivets in the aluminum, he had pushed and kicked for over 2 hours, was nearly exhausted, and wished he had taken some time to get a fish or two and have breakfast. He was also wrinkled as a prune and ready for a break. The tail looked much larger when he got next to it, with a major part of the vertical stabilizer showing and perhaps half of the elevators. Only a short piece of the top of the fuselage, the plane's body toward the tail, was out of the water. Just a curve of aluminum, and at first he could see no place to tie the raft. But he pulled himself along the elevators to the end, and there he found a gap that went in up through the hinges where he could feed his rope through. With the raft secure, he climbed on top of it and lay on his back for 15 minutes, resting and letting the sun warm him. The job, he thought, looked impossible. To have any chance of success, he would have to be strong when he started. Somehow, he had to get inside the plane. All openings, even the small rear cargo hatch, were underwater, so he couldn't get at them without diving and coming up inside the plane, where he would be trapped. He shuddered at the thought and then remembered what was in the front of the plane, down in the bottom of the lake, still strapped in the seat. The body of the pilot, sitting there in the water. Brian could see him, the big man with his hair waving in the current, his eyes open.
Ew!
Stop, he thought. Stop now. Stop that thinking. He was nearly at the point of swimming back to shore and forgetting the whole thing. But the image of the survival pack kept him. If he could get it out of the plane, or if he could just get into it and pull something out, a candy bar, even that, just a candy bar, it would be worth it. But how to get at the inside of the plane? He rolled off the raft and pulled himself around the plane. No openings. 3 times he put his face in the water and opened his eyes and looked down.
Ew.
The water was murky, but he could see perhaps 6 feet, and there was no obvious way to get into the plane. He was blocked.
Seriously, this window.
The grossest part was
This is a different plane. This is a little plane. All right, we're going to stop there for today.
That's pretty gross. For a dead body. You're just looking at it like, ooh, that's
Okay.
For a dead person's body.
Now, chapter 17.
Wait, we're reading it? Oh.
We just read chapter 17. We're going to go through the questions together. Okay? Our vocab words were crudely and stymied, and we talked about both of those when we hit them in the chapter. I hope Kane does his questions on his own. He just bailed on question discussion. It broke my heart. Okay. Why is Brian so anxious to get this survival pack? Jason, why is he so anxious to get the survival pack?
It's called a survival pack because you need it when you're trying to survive.
Well, it's called a survival pack because you need it if you're trying to survive.
And
Thank you.
He's
That was like
he's
obvious.
out in the wild trying to survive, and you need a survival.
He needs
kit
the survival kit to help him continue to
survive. It's literally in the
Okay.
name.
But it
Survival.
doesn't seem to have crossed his mind that the thing has been underwater for a couple of months now.
So that doesn't mean there's other stuff in it. It could be sealed. Could be sealed.
Okay,
like those-
could be sealed, maybe waterproof, we hope. Josie.
It could also, like, there could, maybe what drives him most is that there could be something, like, really important that could help him a lot.
Because just because knives are
Okay.
in water, it doesn't mess
Kendall.
up the knife.
You had your hand raised.
So I think that's inside of the survival kit.
is what he needs to survive, like fishing rod
Clean water.
and
Not that body water.
Yeah, clean water. Water bottles.
Clean water. What else did you say might be in there, Kendall?
clothes and other stuff, and food.
Okay. What else? What else might be in the survival pack that would be helpful for him? Think about the very beginning when we made our own little survival packs. Like, what kind of things do you think he thought? Matches, food,
Knives.
maybe a sleeping bag,
Maybe knives.
knives.
I think there could be fishing bait, clean bottled water.
Fishing stuff, supplies, bottled water,
The water wouldn't be that good.
Flashlights.
flashlight. Would something electric like a flashlight that takes batteries work if it was underwater, had been underwater? Again, we're hoping that the kit is waterproof.
Yeah.
Josie.
Probably not, but something that went to my mind was bear spray.
Bear spray.
Beast
And bug
repellent.
spray.
Okay.
Bug spray. Yeah.
Bug repellent.
'Cause if there's a sleeping
Macy.
bag.
A fishing pole.
Fishing pole. Yep.
Because if there's a sleeping bag, Miss.
Okay, Sean, you had your hand raised. What else is in that kit?
There's I'm saying it like it can help him like make everything he does easier.
It helps in what?
Make stuff easier for him. Like,
Okay, so it's just anything that would make life
Like camping
easier.
supplies. Basically camping
Okay.
supplies.
All right.
A sleeping bag.
So of course he wants this stuff. It's going to make his life better, easier.
How big does he think this thing is?
Okay. All right. What is a fish board? It said he had a board and he was like poking the fish onto the board to cook it.
I've done that
Miss
before.
Fab.
Macy says she's done this before. Tell me about this, Macy.
I hammered a fish. Oh wow.
You hammered a fish. I don't think that's what it said he did.
I'm having a fishing
That's
trap
where you skin it.
set in my mind.
Okay.
I'm thinking
What?
it's like those thin pieces of wood that's like goes around like in Moana. There's a like this fish would swim in, but they won't be able to swim out. But they would. It's like a casket kind of thing. Like the fish can swim in, but they can't swim out.
The trap?
You said
Okay,
it
so he
in-
already made the trap where they can swim in, but they can't swim out. He already made that.
Because there's already a little-
But this said he had a fish board, and this was up by the fire. Parker, what's a fish board?
Maybe the fish board was like a cutting board,
Where you can skin
or
it.
it's where
I know what it
on
is.
the fire.
Okay.
He's probably
Parker
using
says
it
it's something like he's picturing something kind of like a cutting board that he could set the fish on to cook with. Josie.
I'm also kind of thinking of like a cutting board, but maybe it's like not very thick wood and like where he can actually cook them over that, because he said something about like how he didn't have to hold a stick all the time, and then maybe it was a place where he could like skin them and stuff.
put fish in.
All right. I'm trying to find a picture. Doesn't even seem like this thing
Miss Fab,
exists.
do fishing board. Because when it's gonna think just
You
A
put
picture
it
of
on
a
like
fish.
a piece of wood and like
put fish in.
Yeah, it really, I think, is just,
Just
aha.
put
Oh
fish
my
in.
gosh.
Okay.
yeah.
You see this fish sitting on this board here?
It's a cutting board. You said you
It
could
is,
play
yeah.
with
It's just, but is it an official cutting board for Brian? It's basically like a wood plank that he's found.
Yeah.
And it said he took some sort of like peg that he'd carved and stabbed it through the fish's tail, and then he could hold he could just prop the board up next to the fire to cook the fish instead of him having to like hold and turn the stick.
Look like that with him, you can just rub it in the skin.
Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, I wasn't presenting for you guys. My bad.
I typed in fishing board and I came up with like that go
It showed me
fish.
It showed me some board games and it showed me surfboards originally, but
But if
this
you
is
put-
what I finally found. So
Miss
like I
Fab.
think this is something like what we're talking about here.
But that's for a certain type of fish. It said.
Well, it's fine.
Yeah, that can-
Close enough. All right. Why was building a raft so difficult?
I don't think they have anything to tie them together.
Oh.
Grayson says he didn't have anything to tie them together.
Miss
So-
Fab, Miss Fab. It's because the vine thing, whatever he was using, it kept on sliding off because there was no branches. stopping it from just sliding off.
Right, there was no way for him to hook the big main logs together. So how did he end up solving that problem? Sean was hoping he would find some vines, but that's not exactly what happened. What did he end up doing?
He got logged with branches sticking off.
He got logs with branches, but then once it was in the water, that turned out to actually be way more difficult. Why was having logs with branches more difficult once the raft was in the water?
They were steering him off course.
I don't know if they were steering him off course exactly.
Because when he was kind of paddling, it would probably turn it because it was probably sticking in the water, turning the boat.
Okay, he said that. So like, kind of think about if like you were paddling a boat, your boat turns the way that you paddle. So if I only paddled on this side of the boat, I would turn to that direction. If I only paddled on this side of the boat, I would eventually turn this direction. So Jason, you're not wrong. If there were branches mostly sticking out on this side, the raft would want to go in that direction, whichever the branches were dragging.
So you'd have to constantly.
And if you just had branches just sticking straight down in the water, they're going to be trying to pull it down, and it's going to be harder to pull because the thing isn't just floating on the water, it's like down in the water. So you're having to pull it not just on top of the water, but through the whole lake. Good. When Brian finally made it to the plane, what were his problems? Why are we laughing?
It looks like its mouth is. It looks like it's yawning.
Its chin is black.
His chin is black.
It looks like he's going.
And the camera
All right.
like this to Josie. Just rubs his paw against Josie. It looks like
It looks like it's just opening its mouth.
Friends.
Pay attention to Miss Bab or we're gonna get in trouble.
Exactly. Thank you, Maggie. Pay attention. All right. Brian made it to the plane, but then he had a whole bunch more troubles. Kendall, give me one of the troubles.
How you gonna find a door?
There's no door where he's at on the plane, that far back on the plane. Maggie, what else?
He couldn't find a place where he can get into it because it was.
Yeah, no doors, no windows. There's no way for him, obviously, to get in. When it crashed, it didn't like break open. So, Josie.
The pilot's in there. I
The
mean,
dead
that's not
pilot.
really, like a problem, but it's mentally a problem.
Yeah, mentally a problem that if he gets inside the plane, he might see
And smell.
and I don't know if he smells as much in the when you're in the water because you can't sniff when you're in the water or you would suck water up in your nose. But number one, I would think that being that close to the pilot, you are more likely to be exposed to like all the germs and bacteria that come from a dead body.
The water's
Also, what do you like? I mean, I'm just guessing a body that's been sitting in the water for 2 months doesn't look real great.
Pretty soggy.
Jason says it's soggy. It probably looks gross and swollen and nasty and yuck.
I haven't.
Okay. Okay. What other problem did he have? Like he got there immediately, and what problem did he have? Grayson.
He was exhausted.
He was exhausted. He was tired. How long did it say it took him just to get from the shore to the plane?
2 hours.
And when I picture this lake, do you picture a big lake?
Yeah.
So swimming for 2 hours to go like, I'm literally picturing from like, and you guys remember about how big like our classrooms are at school. Like I'm picturing that he really only needed to go from like my room to Miss Delk's room, maybe across the hall. Could you imagine it taking you 2 hours to get from my desk to Miss Delk's desk across the hall?
It wouldn't even take a full minute.
How exhausted would you be swimming that whole time? Swimming makes you tired first off and hungry. But swimming, like pushing something for 2 straight hours,
It's tiring.
very tiring. Yeah.
Miss that.
Okay. So does he have energy to really dive and go looking for openings to this plane? And once he gets inside, he's still underwater. How long can he hold his breath for? Josie, thoughts?
I feel like 15 minutes for resting time against 2 hours of exhaustion and exercise won't do him much.
Yeah, that 15-minute rest probably isn't exactly adequate to get him rested enough for what he's going to need to do next, probably. Do you guys have any thoughts on what Brian can do? We cannot read the next chapter today. We don't have time. But last question for today. What do you think Brian could do to solve the how do I get into the plane problem?
He can use it.
Maggie.
He can maybe like, this is not very stupid, but he could probably use a hatchet or something.
That'll dull the blade.
Use his hatchet
Yeah, that's why.
to just, what is he going to do with his hatchet? How?
He's gonna dull the blade basically.
Okay, it'll make the blade dull, but how? What is he doing with it?
He's doing metal against metal, which isn't good for
Okay, so just hack at the plane, at the
That's
part that's sticking out above the water. So just take his hatchet and just start wailing on it, okay?
But that'll dull it, so then he can't.
But it would dull the hatchet down. Now, but does he have the steel wall in his shelter to sharpen it against still, though?
Yeah.
Yeah. Although, I mean, metal against metal is a bad idea, but
What about the windows?
Yeah, break open the window.
this is not a like a passenger like airline that you picture. There, remember when we looked at this in the beginning? It's a bush plane. The windows are only like right where the cockpit is, where the pilot is. The back of it doesn't have windows.
Well, then I'm thinking go through the back, cut through the wires.
Okay, this is the kind of plane. Hang on, let me hit present. This is the kind of plane they were in. So it's just this back that's sticking out, and the elevators that he said he saw are these pieces that are sticking out sideways. Okay. So all he's seeing stick out is like from where the letter N6 are and back. That's all he's seeing stick out. So he's got to figure out how to get in there. And it says he could only see about 6 feet down, which maybe takes him to about here where it says Super Cub on it, back behind the windows. And once he gets here where the opening is, if he does swim deep enough to the opening, what's going to be right there? The dead pilot.
Unless,
Yuck.
the dead pilot got out.
And if he goes down and swims up into the plane, then he's trapped underwater in the plane
With the dead pilot.
with the dead pilot.
And then they can be dead
But he's got the
together.
survival pack.
I go backwards.
But he can be.
Riley rolled her eyes.
They
She's
can
not
be
feeling
dead
it.
together.
Survival pack means nothing if you're trapped in the underwater plane with the dead pilot, obviously. Okay,
But Miss Bad, you float up.
you wouldn't float up if you were inside the plane.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Nope.
Inside of a plane.
All right,
No, like you with your body, when there's air in your body, you float back.
right. But Jason, this plane is like long way. So the nose of it is down, like probably wedged in the sand at the bottom of the pond. The tail of it's sticking out. He's got to swim down to the opening, and then it said the survival pack is near the back of the plane, near the tail. So then he's got to get back into the back of the tail, get the survival pack,
And here you have to get out.
and then he's got to go back down by the pilot, pull the survival pack out, and swim out. If he were just going to go the most obvious, easy way that you could think of, to just go in the opening that's already there. However, we don't even know if the front of the plane is like messed up or mangled, or maybe that opening's like all dented and messed up.
Well, then yeah, just
don't
break
even know.
Just break
So,
through the back.
Maggie and Grayson say it's metal on metal, it's bad for the hatchet, but he could just start hacking on the tail and try and just cut it open
That's
at
his
the end.
only metal.
Yeah, that's his only.
That's his only metal defense.
It's his main thing. Does he
Yeah,
want to
okay.
potentially destroy the hatchet, which is arguably what's keeping him alive this whole time?
Yeah, because that's the thing that's created his bow, his door.
He needs it for fire. He needs it for his weapons,
Sharpen it,
catching
Sharpen
food.
it. With the
Okay.
blade.
So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
And
We've only got 2
that's
chapters in the epilogue left now.
We only got one chapter and epilogue.
And the epilogue is
Okay.
long.
Epilogue.
All right, so that's it for now. I'm going to hit stop record, and then I will see you guys. Then we'll get going in math.